She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just stood there, hands cuffed, accused of being a cyber terrorist, because she dared outcode the rich white boy who stole her idea. They said she hacked the school, that she was dangerous, that she didn't belong. But what they didn't know, the girl they dragged out of the computer lab in handcuffs was a prodigy, a whistleblower, and the only one smart enough to expose a system built to bury students like her. No backup, no lawyer at first, just a 16-year-old black girl with a flash drive in her hand and the entire courthouse watching. What state are you watching from? And would your schools protect Maya or destroy her? Welcome to Mr. Seven's Stories, where we don't just tell stories, we expose the silent systems try to hide behind. Now, let's follow the girl they tried to erase, and the thunder she brought when no one expected it. That morning, the halls of Clear Haven Academy glowed under the spring sunlight pouring through the tall glass windows. But inside Maya Langston, the season had already shifted. The digital board outside the auditorium displayed in bold letters, Clear Haven Hackathon Finals, 9 a.m., Main Hall. Maya stood alone outside the doors, clutching her project folder and a laptop covered in tech stickers. At 16, she didn't resemble familiar, fair-skinned faces that filled the school. Brown-skinned, her tightly braided hair pulled into a small bun, Maya walked past rows of chairs, as if pushing through a culture that had never invited her in. Still, her eyes didn't waver. For the past 3 months, she had devoted every evening to this project, a predictive algorithm system for traffic accidents based on weather data and vehicle density. And then, Caleb Rourke appeared. He hovered next to Maya's computer with a slanted smile that never reached his eyes. Polo shirt neatly pressed, golden hair slicked back with precision. The only son of Judge Clayton Rourke, the most powerful man at the Redstone County Courthouse. At Clear Haven Academy, the Rourke name carried the weight of iron. Everything he said was treated like gospel. Impressive, Caleb murmured, glancing over the code on Maya's screen. Almost identical to that MIT case study I read a few months back, practically line for line. Maya said nothing. She kept typing into her terminal, lips pressed tight. She knew every single line of that code, lines written with tears in the quiet of midnight, with conviction that people of color could shape the future of Tech 2. 20 minutes later, just as Maya prepared to step on stage for her presentation, 2 security officers approached her. She was asked to step outside without explanation. The principal's office, run by Sheridan Pike, was cold like a courtroom. On the desk lay a printed version of her code, marked with annotations. He slid it toward Maya, his voice dry. "We found that your project is nearly identical to a research study from MIT last year. Do you have anything to say?" "I can explain every line," Maya said, her voice tight. "It's based on an open-source framework, used widely. I didn't copy anything." "It was brought to our attention by Caleb Rourke," Pike replied, eyes fixed on the document. "He's the son of one of the school's biggest donors, and his word carries weight." Even though Maya presented evidence, offered to rewrite the code on the spot, even offered to pull up her version history and backups to prove the process, the decision had already been made. Her project was disqualified from the finals. And from that moment on, the entire world of Clear Haven Academy turned its back on her. Teachers fell silent. Friends quietly withdrew. Suspicious glances and whispered rumors followed her through every hallway. Even the teachers who once praised Maya now gave her only curt nods. She was no longer the model student. She had been boxing, the cheater, the brown girl who rose too fast. Only one person refused to believe the rumors, her computer science teacher, Miss Carmen Delgado. But she had been reassigned shortly after advocating for more equitable admissions for minority students. That night, Maya sat alone in the library, the dim glow of her laptop screen casting a reflection of quiet defiance across her face. Beside her lay an old photo, her and Grandma Ruth, the woman who taught her never to bow to injustice. "It's not because you're smart that they hate you," Ruth once told her. "It's because you dare to shine where they want you dimmed." Maya clenched the mouse and reopened the code once more. She didn't yet know that the road ahead wouldn't just be about personal vindication, but about exposing an entire system built to bury the truth, and she had just stumbled into it. It was Maya's third night in a row returning to the Clearhaven Academy library. By night, the school felt less like an elite institution and more like a monument. Its polished wooden walls no longer academic, but cold and imposing. She tucked herself into a quiet corner on the second floor, where the Wi-Fi signal was weak and the security cameras often glitched. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, the rhythmic tapping the only anchor holding her steady. She couldn't accept the way she had been cut from the competition, not just because of pride, but because if they could do it to her, they could do it to anyone like her, a person of color, brilliant, but without powerful backing. Maya flipped to the first page of the student handbook, the section titled Internal Appeal Procedures. But it was just a formality. There was no real mechanism for a student to challenge the administration's decisions. So she started searching for a way into the school's internal data storage system. Not to sabotage, but to understand. To understand how a decision like hers could be made so quickly, so cleanly. At first, she only meant to look at email exchanges between Principal Sheridan Pike and the competition judges. But then, a hidden file caught her eye, legacy allocation logs. She held her breath as she opened it. The screen filled with spreadsheet after spreadsheet, labeled by academic year, with columns listing student names, race, total scores, and scholarship status. One separate column was marked Legacy Priority, with notes like Father, Class of 1985 alumnus, Mother, Silver Tier donor, and Founding Family Lineage. And further down, a list titled Scholarship Reallocation Candidates, overwhelmingly filled with Latino, African, and Asian surnames. A chill ran down Maya's spine. This wasn't a glitch. This was deliberate. Some of the notes even referenced minority students with top scores being removed from full scholarship consideration simply for lacking heritage or long-term community alignment with Clearhaven. And on row 47, she saw her own name, struck from the full scholarship list. The note beside it read, exceeds performance benchmarks, but family background not aligned with the school's long-term mission. Beside her name on the spreadsheet was a familiar one, Caleb Rourke, listed as a recipient of the Emerging Diversity Potential Scholarship, originally intended for underrepresented minority students. A red annotation made it crystal clear, transferred from the Social Equity Fund. Maya gripped the keyboard, throat tightening as if someone had shoved burning coals down her windpipe. Scholarships meant for people like her friends, were being used to further entrench privilege for those who already had too much. She immediately backed up the entire file to her personal hard drive. Maya knew she had just poked a venomous hive, but the fury swelling inside her left no room for retreat. As she left the library just before 11 p.m., a security guard walking past gave her a longer than usual glance. She forced a smile, nodding politely, but his gaze was razor sharp, as if he knew she just entered a place she wasn't meant to. Back home, Maya quietly crept into the small bedroom she shared with Grandma Ruth, who was asleep on the ground floor of their Brentwood apartment. The faint light from the hallway spilled through the frosted glass. Maya looked at Ruth's weathered, wrinkled face, and for the first time since being disqualified, she broke down and cried. Not because she lost, but because she now knew the game had always been rigged so that people like her were never meant to win. 2 days after that fateful night, Maya returned to computer lab at Clearhaven Academy to continue downloading the files. She knew she couldn't keep them stored locally for long. What she had discovered could shake the school's entire foundation. But she hadn't had time to send them yet. That night, just as she connected her laptop to the internal server, the rear security door burst open. A blinding flashlight beam cut across her face. Freeze! Hands where we can see them. 2 police officers stepped inside, one tall and broad-shouldered with tight buzz cut, the other with eyes like steel and a voice soaked in authority. Officer Brent Halvorsen and Officer Cody Wexler. Names well known throughout Redstone County, especially in communities of color. I'm a student here, Maya said quickly. I have authorized access to this lab. I haven't done anything wrong. Shut it, Wexler barked, twisting her arm behind her back with no mercy. Maya screamed as her wrist was yanked up, a searing pain slicing through her shoulder, unlawful entry, tampering with school systems, intentional access to sensitive data. Halvorsen read aloud like he was performing in some low-budget crime show. "You got the wrong person." Maya struggled, but the pressure of the cuffs forced her knees to buckle. A familiar voice rang out from behind them. "Check her backpack." It was Principal Sheridan Pike, standing just behind him, looking as if he'd been invited to watch the spectacle, was Caleb Rourke, that same tilted smirk from before, now laced with chilling satisfaction. Halvorsen rummaged through Maya's backpack, then suddenly pulled out a small, unlabeled black flash drive. "Hacker tool," he declared, as if he'd just uncovered a weapon of mass destruction. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." Maya shouted. "Predictable," Pike muttered, shaking his head. "A real shame. You were one of our most promising students. But it seems reputation doesn't always come with ethics." In a haze of panic, Maya glanced back one last time at the shimmering Clearhaven nameplate etched into the marble wall down the hall, the very symbol of her academic dreams. That dream was now stuffed into the back seat of a police cruiser. At the Redstone County Police Department, Maya was led into a small holding cell reeking of bleach and cold metal. The handcuffs were removed, but red welts remained on her wrists, thin scrapes that stung like iron bands embedded in her skin. 2 hours later, a tall man with a thick mustache and a sneer in his eyes entered the room. Detective Troy Keenan. Well, Maya Langston," he began, tossing a thick file onto the table like slamming shut a trap. 16 years old, but given the seriousness of the charges, we're processing you as an adult." "No, I'm a high school student. You can't." "Oh, but the system says you're 18, Keenan cut in. "Clerical error, perhaps." "And here's what we found at the scene: a flash drive with decryption software and video footage of you accessing the internal server. Gotta say, it's all pretty airtight." Maya froze. That flash drive was planted. The video? Who filmed it? How? It was as if every detail of this trap had been staged frame by frame. Then the door swung open again. A man in a polished sheriff's uniform stepped in, badge glinting under the overhead lights. "Sheriff Colton Maddox." "She's a bigger problem than you think," Maddox said, placing a firm hand on Keenan's shoulder. "I want direct oversight on this case. All documents are to come to me before they go to the DA." Keenan nodded. Maya stared at Maddox, a chill crawling down her spine. There was no compassion in his eyes, only the cold calculation of someone who had destroyed lives without leaving fingerprints. "We'll be recommending full prosecution, unauthorized access to technology systems, data theft, possibly additional state-level cybercrime charges," Maddox stated. "I have the right to an attorney." Maya shouted, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. "You do," Maddox replied coolly. "But that lawyer's going to have to be a miracle worker to keep you out of a 15-year sentence." He gave a dry, mocking smile, then leaned in slightly. "Welcome to the adult world, little girl." Maya sat frozen, surrounded by power, trapped by lies, stripped of identity, and completely alone. What she didn't yet know was that inside the delicate silver bracelet Ruth had given her for her 16th birthday, hidden deep in the design, was something that would change everything. But tonight, all Maya could feel was that her freedom had been stolen, and justice, it seemed, had never been on her side. Monday morning at the Redstone County Courthouse was as cold as the marble floor beneath Maya Langston's worn sneakers. She wore a plain ash-gray t-shirt and faded jeans, no trace left of the honor student once praised by Clearhaven Academy. Her eyes were sunken from sleepless nights. Faint marks from the handcuffs still circled her wrists. From the elevated bench, Judge Clayton Rourke wore his black robe like it was a symbol of higher authority, not just justice, but ceremony, as if he were presiding over a right of power rather than the arraignment of a 16-year-old girl. Beside him, District Attorney Ronan Vale remained silent, nodding in rhythm with a script already decided. Case number 68219. The State of North Carolina versus Maya Langston. The court clerk announced. Camille Reddick, Maya's attorney, Ruth's longtime friend, and the only person still standing by the young girl, rose immediately with an objection. "Your Honor, my client is a minor, Trying her as an adult is a violation of due process. We have her birth certificate, school ID, and hospital records, all proving she's only 16. Rourke flipped through the documents with disinterest. According to the official file, Miss Langston is 18. Any disputes can be handled later. This is deliberate falsification, Your Honor. Camille pressed. We request a continuance until age verification. Request denied. Rourke cut her off, his tone hard as granite. This court is not swayed by emotion or the grandstanding of attorneys who fancy themselves civil rights crusaders. Maya swallowed hard, steadying her breath. Around her wrist, the silver bracelet Ruth had given her for her 16th birthday sat snug and quiet. Somewhere a few miles from the courthouse, her cousin Isaiah Langston sat in a cramped apartment surrounded by monitors and coil cables, eyes locked on a dashboard, fingers poised over keys. The recorder hidden in the bracelet had been active since the moment Maya left the holding cell that morning. Every word, every order, every prejudiced undertone. It was all captured. But Isaiah wasn't just recording. Yesterday, he had secretly hacked into the internal security system of the Redstone County Courthouse. And thanks to a small vulnerability left behind by a former IT intern, Isaiah had done what no one thought possible. He began live streaming the trial from the courthouse's own surveillance feed. A line of text blinked on his remote operation screen. Live channel. Hashtag Justice for Maya. 3,284 viewers. 10/4/20, 41/2/23. Inside the courtroom, no one knew that every move, every word, every injustice was being watched by tens of thousands across the country. Before Camille could say more, Judge Rourke slammed his gavel, so forcefully it echoed through the walls. Miss Langston, you are charged with unauthorized access to school data systems, theft of financial information, and conspiracy to disrupt academic security. There is no legitimate evidence to support these claims, Camille countered, voice unwavering. And the prosecution's entire submission shows clear signs of tampering. Ms. Reddick, I've warned you, Rourke growled. If you continue this line of... Suddenly, the large monitor behind the bench lit up. A voice boomed from the courtroom's own speakers. A crystal-clear recording of Judge Rourke, caught in a closed-door meeting. This girl needs a lesson. Send her to adult detention, and every other one like her will learn not to mess with the system. Everyone in the courtroom froze. Judge Rourke shot to his feet. Who's controlling the system? Security cut the feed now. But it was too late. Screens throughout the courtroom, including those of the witnesses' phones and even monitors in the waiting area, began displaying footage from the courthouse security cameras. It showed Maya in handcuffs, being forced to kneel in front of the bench. It was Judge Rourke who gave the order, and it was Officers Halvorsen and Wexler who pinned her down. A media earthquake erupted in real time, right in the middle of the trial. The hashtag Justice for Maya spread like wildfire. Within 3 minutes, major news outlets picked up the story. CNN, MSNBC, even independent news channels. They were all broadcasting the same video. A 16-year-old black girl, forced to kneel before a white judge in a courtroom devoid of justice. And the one thing the system hadn't anticipated? The entire nation was watching. Maya was still on her knees, but her head was held high. And for the first time since her arrest, she smiled. Not because she had won, but because now the world had seen what they tried so hard to bury. 3 hours after the chaotic hearing at Redstone County Courthouse, the national media had saturated every outlet with the footage. The image of Maya Langston being forced to kneel before Judge Clayton Rourke had become a symbol of nationwide outrage. The hashtag Justice for Maya reached Twitter's #1 trending spot within 17 minutes, igniting fierce conversations on racial injustice, judicial abuse of power, and the distortion of truth. But inside a discreet oak panel room at Redstone's council building, the unofficial headquarters of the Redstone Heritage League, men in tailored suits and women in turtlenecks sat around a long mahogany table. This wasn't just a local culture preservation group. Despite how they branded themselves to press, this was a network that controlled the schools, the courts, the hospitals, law enforcement, and even the local media infrastructure of Redstone. We're losing the narrative, Principal Sheridan Pike blurted, sweat glistening beneath his cream linen blazer. That girl's become a symbol, if we don't act. Symbols are the easiest things to shatter, DA Ronenvale interjected, voice gravelly. We just need to show the public that she's not a hero. She's a threat. At the head of the table sat Judge Rourke, his face stony as marble. In his hand was a tablet displaying a document titled Perception Management Campaign, Phase 1. Beside him sat Sheriff Colton Maddox, in a white dress shirt without a tie, casually flipping through a thick stack of classified reports. She's a computer prodigy? Rourke said, then let the public believe she used those skills to attack our judicial system. We'll fabricate an event, he continued, a controlled cyber attack, then blame it all on the girl. I have a tech team on standby, Maddox replied coldly. We'll scramble signals, issue fake alerts, and I'll hold a press conference naming Maya Langston as the prime suspect. People will believe anything, as long as it comes from a uniform. 2 days later, the residents of Redstone County woke up to chaos. Traffic signs blinked erratically. Stoplights changed at random. Patient records at St. Aurora Hospital were suddenly temporarily unavailable. Dozens of Clearhaven Academy emails were sent out to parents, filled with false information. At 7:03 a.m., an emergency broadcast flashed across Channel 7. Countywide cyber attack, warning from Redstone Security Board. The news anchor spoke with urgency into the mic. According to police sources, the hacker behind the mass system disruption is Maya Langston, a 16-year-old girl currently under investigation for high-tech crimes. An anonymous source claimed she developed the attack software using stolen data from Clearhaven Academy. Alongside the report appeared an enlarged photo of Maya, her school ID, framed in red, stamped with bold letters, "Wanted, dangerous." Later that morning, at a press conference surrounded by microphones and flashing cameras, Sheriff Colton Maddox declared Maya a high-tech threat requiring immediate capture to ensure public safety. Inside an abandoned church in Brentwood, where Maya and Camille Reddick were hiding, every screen suddenly lit up with flashing emergency alerts. Camille rushed to shut off all connected devices. They're building a terrorism file against you, she said, and they now have legal grounds to deploy tactical response units. But I didn't do anything. Maya cried out. It doesn't matter, Camille said quietly. They don't need the truth. They need a reason to erase you. Outside, the beating sound of helicopters grew louder. Armored tactical trucks from the state's Special Response Unit rolled into Redstone like a town under siege, mobilized personally by Maddox. On digital billboards lining the highway, flashing red text appeared in emergency font. Wanted, cybercriminal, warning, Maya Langston do not approach. Meanwhile, in a small apartment 150 miles away, Isaiah Langston watched it all unfold across a triple monitor setup. They're burning your identity to the ground, he said through an encrypted earpiece wired to Camille. But they don't realize you're no longer just a name. You're a symbol, and symbols multiply. Maya sat frozen for a moment, then clenched her fists. They want to paint me as a destroyer, she said slowly. Then I'll use every destructive skill I have to expose every rotten thread in their system. Camille gave a quiet smile and rested a hand on Maya's shoulder. They want to run a propaganda campaign, but you're not fighting alone anymore. The network is growing, and every lie they build will be undone by a truth big enough to burn it all down. Maya finished, her eyes fixed on the window. Outside, the sky over Redstone darkened, not from rain, but from the shadow of a system trying to block out the light. But somewhere out there, a single bolt of lightning cracked open the clouds. And this time, Maya would be the thunder. 3 days after Maya Langston was labeled a domestic terrorist by the Redstone County authorities, she, Camille Reddick, and Isaiah Langston were escorted to a location whispered about only in circles resisting the Redstone Heritage League. The Signal Corps, a basement beneath an abandoned print shop on the southern edge of Brentwood. Behind a rusted steel door lay a maze of narrow corridors, draped in blackout curtains and heat-resistant insulation. Maya walked past walls plastered with satellite imagery, residential zoning maps, and confidential documents printed on craft paper. Inside her, a strange sensation stirred, equal parts fear and awakening. Seated around a metal table in the center of the room were 7 individuals, each once part of the system, before that system turned its back on them. "Welcome to the Signal Corps," said a woman with a voice as firm and steady as oak. Maya recognized her instantly. Carmen Delgado, former computer science teacher at Clearhaven, fired simply for pushing to increase minority admissions. "I'm glad you're safe," Maya whispered. "Thanks to a stubborn nurse at St. Aurora and an old propane-fueled taxi." Carmen chuckled, her eyes glowing behind thick glasses. Next to her sat Malcolm Rivera, former cybersecurity engineer for the district court, dismissed for insubordination. Now, he was the architect of the encrypted communications network the group relied on to stay connected. Then there was Nyla Freeman, an investigative journalist who once exposed housing allocation inequities until a report was scrubbed from every platform. She nodded at Maya, her gaze as if she'd known her for years through miles of printed records. 2 more. Janessa Vaughn, a nurse suspended for reporting racial disparities in patient treatment at Briarwood Medical Sanctuary. And Malik Drayton, a former real estate broker who refused to take part in the quiet displacement of black families from redevelopment-targeted neighborhoods. Lastly, a quiet, towering man with a steely face and words that came few and sharp. Dorian Shepard, a former military officer who had secretly recorded hundreds of hours of internal meetings from within Brentwood's local government. Conversations that revealed coordinated restructuring plans targeting minority communities. "You're the spark," Dorian said slowly. "But this fire's been smoldering for years." They called themselves the Signal Corps, a coalition of survivors from a rotting system, who decided silence was no longer an option. For hours that followed, Maya was walked through file after file. Hospital data showing black patients died twice as often as white patients with the same medical conditions. Evidence of a local bank's discriminatory lending practices, rejecting non-white applicants despite identical credit scores. Urban planning documents sponsored by the Redstone Heritage League, mapping redevelopment boundaries that cut directly through historic black neighborhoods in Brentwood. And most damning of all, a chain of internal emails between key figures Judge Rourke, DA Ronan Vale, Principal Sheridan Pike, and Sheriff Colton Maddox, openly discussing a plan to rebalance residential demographics to preserve Redstone's cultural heritage. In one email, Maddox explicitly proposed coercive measures, from acid investigations to targeted detentions, designed to pressure minority families into leaving. "You're no longer just an accused individual," Carmen said. "You're a fracture point the whole system is desperate to seal shut." Maya glanced around the room, walls covered in hand-painted slogans. Truth doesn't need a microphone, only resonance. When justice goes silent, we force her to listen. For the first time since her arrest, since being branded dangerous, Maya felt something she hadn't in weeks. She wasn't alone. "What do we do next?" she asked, her voice steady. Dorian handed her a lead-cased USB drive. "You're going back to the scene. And this time, not to plead for justice, but to force it to show up." But Maya and the Signal Corps didn't get a chance to act. 1 week after she joined the group, darkness began swallowing everything she once believed to be real. By Tuesday noon, Camille Reddick called Maya from an empty courtroom in Redstone County. Her voice was strained, brittle like a drawn bowstring. "They served me with a license suspension order, alleging politically provocative misconduct." Maya froze. "No hearing? No warning?" she asked. "Nothing, Maya. And worse, Isaiah's gone missing. I haven't been able to reach him since last night. By nightfall, the worst came crashing in. Isaiah was found in an empty parking lot on the outskirts of Redstone, face bruised, jaw fractured, ribs cracked. The one who brought the news was Jamal Ellington, a young officer from the Redstone Force, one of the few who had secretly fed information to Camille. "He was ambushed," Jamal said when he met Maya in the abandoned chapel. "This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't an accident. It was a warning, and I know who gave the order." "Colton Maddox," Maya whispered, as if the name itself carved into her chest. Redstone Sheriff, the architect of the system's most ruthless and precise campaigns of suppression. A man who left no fingerprints, only fallout. Maya sat silently beside the blanket-wrapped figure of Isaiah in the ICU. His breathing was faint, but in his hand, He clutched something, a crumpled, blood-stained slip of paper. 2 letters, scrawled in permanent marker. Rain. While Maya was still trying to unravel the meaning of rain, another blow struck. The following afternoon, Ruth Langston, the woman who once taught Maya right from wrong through nightly stories, was admitted into the ICU at St. Aurora Hospital. Diagnosis: acute poisoning. Lab tests revealed traces of hydrazine, an industrial chemical never prescribed to Ruth in any form. No one saw anything. Maya shouted down the hospital corridor, hands trembling. Cameras? Nurses? Medication logs. They wiped everything, Camille said, her voice no longer angry, just tired. Maya, this system doesn't just twist the truth, it suffocates life. In the midst of pain that had no time to heal, something unexpected happened. Declan Pike, student body president of Clearhaven and the unacknowledged son of Principal Sheridan Pike, secretly reached out to Maya. Declan had grown up with his mother, never publicly recognized by the Pike family, attending Clearhaven only through a symbolic scholarship. He was never truly part of the Pike legacy, and that was precisely why he understood what Maya was fighting against. Their meeting took place in an abandoned train station at the edge of Brentwood. Maya wore a silver-gray hoodie, carried no phone, and left behind all biometric traces. She trusted no one. But Declan showed up with an unfamiliar look, shaken, afraid, yet resolute. They gave me a script, Declan said, handing over a folder stamped with the seal of the Redstone Heritage League. I'm supposed to read at the memorial for victims of the cyber attack caused by Maya Langston. But this... Maya flipped through the pages. Each line, each expression choreographed like state-sponsored theater. When I refused, my mom called me crying. Someone had shown up at her house with a warrant for unusual acid inspection. Maya stared at him, long enough that Declan felt the air leave his lungs. Then she nodded. You've got 2 choices now. Read their script. Or help me write another one. One that's truer, rougher, and impossible to erase. After that night, Maya vanished from every radar. She abandoned all devices, IDs, any trace of tech. What remained was only herself, no longer wide-eyed, but with a memory sharp as cut glass. She moved through forgotten bus stations, slept in laundromat basements, church kitchens, and empty storage units. From honor student to ghost of the system. But everywhere she stopped, she left something behind. A printed scholarship rejection letter, a snippet of traceable data code, a simple sketch illustrating the manipulation cycle of the Redstone Heritage League. Whispers began to spread. That girl's rewriting history. Not with guns, not with slogans, but with silence that forces the whole system to pause. Inside Redstone, cracks had begun to form. Not in courtrooms, but in conscience. And Maya knew if she wanted to change the system, she had to let go of her name. But when a name is erased from the system, it's carved even deeper into the memory of those it tried to bury. That night, Saturday, 8:14 p.m., the ballroom of the Northwick Grand Hotel in downtown Redstone glittered under hundreds of crystal chandeliers, echoing with the laughter of the region's most powerful. A banner hung proudly above the entrance. Redstone Heritage League Annual Heritage Gala. Framed in oak between the state and U.S. flags, both pressed without a single crease. Among the guests draped in tuxedos and evening gowns, parading under the banner of community cultural heritage, no one noticed a new server entering quietly through the side door. A tall young woman with her hair neatly pinned up, light makeup, and a tray of champagne in her hands. No one recognized Maya Langston. She had spent 2 weeks planning this. From applying under a false name as a kitchen temp, Rain Matthews, the name Isaiah had scrawled in blood before falling unconscious, to planting a miniature recording device in the lapel of her uniform. That device was wired directly to the secure archive system of the Signal Corps, buried deep within a server hidden inside an abandoned library in Brentwood. Ray Matthews had once been an audio tech for major events hosted by the Redstone Heritage League. A year ago, he vanished after accidentally overhearing internal recordings between Rourke, Maddox, and Vale, conversations about rebalancing the residential structure and eliminating anti-traditional influences. His name was erased from all records, but Isaiah had dug into his story. And now, Maya carried both his name and his mission. She moved with purpose, never letting anyone see her face for more than 2 seconds. She drifted past what sounded like harmless conversations, yet at their core they pulsed with power, rezoning Brentwood, adjusting scholarship targets, and cleansing progressive ideology among the youth. Then she spotted them. Clayton Rourke, in a midnight blue suit, stood with Ronan Vale, Principal Sheridan Pike, and Colton Maddox, the Redstone County Sheriff, the man behind countless acts of suppression, beatings, and so-called community protection at all costs. "They can't indict without a living witness," Rourke muttered. And Ruth Langston? Predictable. One small dose in the 4-line, and no one questions it. Just another old woman dying of age. Maddox smirked. "Same way we cleaned up Isaiah Langston. No one mourns a disruptor." Maya clenched the tray in her hands, blood pounding in her temples. She had heard enough. For the first time, she held an undeniable weapon. The truth, straight from the mouths of the powerful. But fate wouldn't let her walk away so easily. At 10:32 p.m., as Maya slipped out of ballroom through the service exit, a security guard noticed something off. She didn't match the roster of temporary staff. "Who are you?" he asked, stepping closer. No answer. Maya turned, about to remove her earpiece to signal the signal corps, when 3 men in black suits appeared, blocking her path. One drew a gun, no warning, aiming straight at her chest. "You shouldn't be here." Maya ran. She sprinted down a side corridor, slammed through an emergency door, her feet skidding across wet tile. Behind her, a voice yelled, "Fire!" A bullet whizzed past her ear, shattering a hallway mirror. The shard sliced into her left shoulder. Gritting her teeth, Maya clutched the wound and bolted toward the underground parking garage. Just when it seemed like there was no way out, a beat-up 1999 Dodge truck roared around the corner, the passenger door flinging open with a loud slam. Carmen Delgado was behind the wheel. "Get in!" Maya dove into the back seat, her shirt soaked in blood. The truck reversed hard, spun 180 degrees, and shot off into the redstone night, leaving behind men who once held all the power, but for the first time had lost control. An hour later, at the makeshift Signal Corps base, Malcolm Rivera extracted the recording. Rourke's voice echoed through the speaker. Ruth Langston? Predictable. One small dose in the 4-line, and no one questions it. The room fell silent. Camille pulled Maya into her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You did the one thing this whole system has fought to prevent. You made them tell the truth themselves." And for the first time, the ones at the top had signed their own indictment. 3 days after the bloodstained gala, Maya Langston was arrested again. This time, there were no official charges, no warrants, just an unmarked black SUV pulling up outside a temporary medical station where Maya was getting her shoulder wound dressed. 4 men in uniforms marked North Carolina State Tactical Operations Unit stormed in, subdued her with a stun gun, blindfolded her, and zip-tied her wrists. She was taken back to where it all began, the Redstone Superior Court. When Maya entered the courtroom, there was no audience. The media was barred. All cameras had been removed. The dim yellow light seemed to echo the shame of a system trying to bury its own truth. Judge Clayton Rourke sat high on the bench, his hand tapping the gavel with a slow, deliberate rhythm. On either side sat Principal Sheridan Pike, face rigid, and District Attorney Ronan Vale, flipping through files with chilling indifference. Below them stood Sheriff Colton Maddox, arms folded, his holster gun occasionally flashing beneath his coat. The defendant, Maya Langston, Rourke said sternly, "You stand accused of state-level treason, cybercrimes, inciting civil unrest, and conspiracy to assassinate senior leadership." Maya said nothing. She was on her knees for the second time in her life. But this time, she was ready. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Ronan Vale asked. His tone was dry, like wet paper, ready to tear her apart with a single glare. At exactly 10:01 a.m., every light in the courtroom went dark. A single beep sounded from the microphone in front of Rourke. Then a voice, deep, clear, unmistakable, came through the courtroom speakers. She was too predictable. One small dose in the foreline, and no one suspect a thing. As long as Declan reads the script right, we'll take care of rewriting history. Shift the scholarships to the legacy track. No one checks that. It's family tradition. Then the ceiling projector flickered on. Footage from the gala began to play, captured by the hidden camera inside Maya's uniform pin. Faces filled the screen. Rourke, Vale, Pike, Maddox, each one caught in a moment that could never be denied. The entire courtroom froze. Ronan Vale went pale. Sheridan Pike instinctively stepped back. Maddox reached for his gun. But before he could draw, the doors swung open. 3 FBI agents in dark suits entered, led by Federal Supervisor Conrad Ellison, 52, once barred for years from investigating Redstone by the Heritage League, now returning with federal arrest warrants in hand. He read each charge aloud, clear and unshaken. Judge Clayton Rourke, charged with second-degree murder, judicial corruption, and abuse of power. Principal Sheridan Pike, charged with civil rights violations, systemic racial discrimination, and complicity in academic fraud. District Attorney Ronan Vale, charged with malicious prosecution, obstruction of justice, and falsification of judicial records. Sheriff Colton Maddox, charged with unlawful use of force, illegal detention, and human rights violations. No one resisted. Maya stood, no help needed, locking eyes with each of them. "Thank you for arriving just in time," she said to Ellison. He nodded, voice steady. "We should have come 10 years ago. But thanks to you, there's nowhere left for the system to hide." 11:45 a.m. Breaking news exploded across every screen. Redstone shaken, judge, principal, prosecutor, and sheriff arrested in the very courtroom they controlled. Outside, beneath a soft drizzle, crowds filled the courthouse steps, holding signs high. #Justice for Maya. And for everyone whose silence was once mistaken for consent, Maya didn't return home. Instead, she walked back to the Signal Corps, to the quiet room where a photo of Ruth Langston still hung, beside a wall that had once been torn down by the city, but rebuilt with stone by students who refused to forget. She placed her hand on the frame and whispered. I didn't have to scream to be heard. I just had to make the system listen in silence. And at last, justice wasn't just a dream. It was a presence, recorded, projected, and carved into the heart of America. 6 months after the trial that shook the nation, Maya Langston, the 16-year-old once handcuffed, accused, and forced to kneel before a system that never saw her humanity, now stood tall in a space far different. The United States House of Representatives, Washington, D.C. The hearing room was unusually still. "Thank you for being here today, Miss Langston," a member of Congress said, holding a file over 300 pages thick. "Can you share what kept you going, even when everything seemed against you?" Maya looked up. There was no fear left in her eyes, no trembling like a teenager cornered by the weight of false judgment. Her voice was calm, every word a nail driven into the foundation of history. "Because I once witnessed a woman, Mrs. Ruth Langston, stand up to injustice with nothing but patience and a belief that justice isn't a privilege, it's a responsibility. She never shouted, never retaliated. But every step she took was a message the world couldn't ignore. I'm just continuing that path." Silence. Then applause, thunderous, rising not for her words, but for the presence of a living symbol of defiance and grace. 1 week later, a federal court sentenced Principal Clayton Rourke, Sheridan Pike, Ronan Vale, Chief Colton Maddox, and 9 other members of the Redstone Heritage League to a combined 20-plus years in prison. Maya's testimony, the files from the Signal Corps, and the original recordings formed a case too ironclad to deny. No more legacies. No more immunity. Only justice. Isaiah Langston, her cousin once left near death in a parking lot ambush, was now receiving care at a federal medical center in North Carolina. He survived, recovering slowly but surely. After the trial, Isaiah didn't return to his old life. He took on a new mission, safeguarding the nation's data integrity under the supervision of the Signal Corps. No longer the messenger in the shadows, he had become a gatekeeper of the light. Mrs. Ruth Langston, who nearly lost her life to a syringe tainted with hydrazine, also survived, miraculously. Though the poisoning left her with permanent damage to her respiratory system, she could still speak, still read, still tell stories to children at the Elias Haven Senior Center, a place built on the outskirts of Brentwood by Maya and the community through grassroots fundraising. To the children there, she was known simply as the story grandmother who never scolds. In October, the Ruth Langston Memorial Fellowship was officially launched. It offered full scholarship for students of color pursuing degrees in technology, law, and social ethics. Maya didn't just lend her name. She wrote the actual selection criteria from scratch. When her acceptance letter from MIT arrived, Maya didn't post it online or celebrate loudly. She simply folded it, placed it on her grandmother's altar in their small Brentwood apartment, and whispered, "See, Grandma, I didn't just survive. I'm rebuilding the whole system." At MIT, Maya began developing Bias Breaker, an open-source platform capable of analyzing judicial decisions to detect racial bias and implicit prejudice. Within 3 months, more than 120 courts across 18 states voluntarily joined the pilot program. She didn't go to the press, didn't accept talk show invites. Maya stayed true to her way, quiet, sharp, and never asking permission to exist. The ending to her story didn't arrive with flashing cameras or breaking news banners. It came in the form of a bronze plaque mounted on the front of Redstone's newly transformed library, the very building that once housed buried data, now reborn as an independent research center named the Langston Initiative for Ethical Justice Innovation. At the inauguration, Maya didn't give a long speech. She simply placed her hand on the plaque and smiled. This isn't where justice ends. It's where justice begins to be reprogrammed. Beneath the main inscription, a smaller line was engraved with quiet reverence: Project Honor Light, in memory of Ruth Langston, who lit the first spark in an age of shadows. Because, as Maya once told Congress, justice isn't about the triumph of one person. It's about passing down the courage to stand tall without needing to shout. She didn't choose to reclaim freedom for herself. She chose to restore faith for an entire nation.